This is part 2 of the Bret Harte lecture. So Mark Twain and Bret Harte became friends. They helped each other during their literary careers, and they had a volatile relationship that ended up decaying later. We will talk about that. But interestingly, as Harte is working for the Golden Era, he refers to himself as the Bohemian. And this is interesting because Bohemianism is a term that represents people who live a free life despite conventionalities and have little regard for social standards. And in the 1800s, a man named Henry Clapp brought Bohemianism, the idea of it, from France to New York and opened a bar named Pfaff's. And this is where the literary giants of the time, or who were becoming giants, gathered to drink and write. Also, Walt Whitman was there, among others. So they were considered the Bohemians of the East Coast at the time. And Bret Harte, however, working on the West Coast, described San Francisco as the Bohemia of the West. So the group on the West Coast that were working with Harte, and this included Mark Twain, others such as Charles Warren Stoddard, Ina Coolbrith, they became the Bohemians on the West Coast at the time. So they gathered together in salons, they worked together and wrote. Bret Harte was a huge help to others in editing as well, helping them get published, and considered a great friend to those that he helped to get published. Eventually, Harte leaves the Golden Era and begins at the Overland Monthly as an editor. You can see this cover art at the time was considered very savvy because the bear was representative of the ancient symbol of California, but it was growling at the train tracks, which were representative of incoming civilization because the railroad was coming in. And this is where Bret Harte publishes the story that really makes him famous, and it's called The Luck of Roaring Camp. And again, this story has the characters that are true Western characters that he invented, and they've become stereotypical over time. But it's about a prostitute who gives birth to this child named Luck. The woman dies, and the characters of the mines raise the child unsuccessfully, but again, full of this regionalism, the local color that people have come to expect of Twain, and it really is received differently on each coast. Actually, the Californians are very offended by it. They feel like it's unchristian, immoral. However, the East Coasters actually love this story. It's representative of this snapshot of California life at the time, and they want Harte to write more of it. So the fact that the East Coast accepts it with open arms causes Californians to end up accepting this story as well. What's interesting is Harte writes some other stories that have the mother lode names within them, so it's just kind of neat to see this connection. The Youngest Prospector in Calaveras, The Rose of Tuolumne, Brown of Calaveras, The Boom in the Calaveras Clarion. So he was in this area at different times during his life, and the characters that he ran into made his way into his stories. So at the same time, Harte has trouble financially. He's not very shrewd financially. He borrows from a lot of people, doesn't pay them back, and he starts getting into trouble financially. His friends get irritated with him because of this, and he becomes just tired of being in California, tired of dealing with this trouble. He's always kind of looked down on California in a way because he really views the East Coast as superior in the ways of, Harte tends to be a proper dresser. He wears velvet waistcoats and flashy ties and kind of a dandy. So he dresses very well. He's very cultured, his language, his way he holds himself. So he really admires the East Coast sensibility and that conservative way of life. And so he decides to move to the East Coast, and he starts hanging out with the Brahmins of that era, which include Ralph Waldo Emerson and the like. And because of his success in writing his stories, he's welcomed by the East Coasters very heartily, and they're actually all vying for him to move to their town. They want to claim him as living in their town. And he gets offered a job for the Atlantic Monthly, which is a prestigious magazine, and they give him $10,000 a year to write 12 stories a year. And at that time, that's the highest figure ever offered an American writer. It's astronomical sum compared to what writers normally make. So it seems like Harte's really stepped into a lucky place, and the problem is that he doesn't adjust well to the East Coast. He thought that's where he wanted to be, but he's just not fitting in. He's not writing with the same intensity that he was before, and he's also expected to lecture, which is not something he had done before. Lecturing was something that Twain was tremendously successful doing. Twain had a natural storytelling ability. He could imitate voices, and he would pack houses across the country with audiences that wanted to hear him. However, when Harte first lectures, he's a big disappointment. He holds his head down the entire time and mumbles, and when asked to speak up, he ignores the audience and no one can really hear what he's saying. So all of these little things start making him lose the favor of the literary crowd. In addition, he doesn't always come through with his monthly story for the Atlantic Monthly. So he soon is not the most popular on the East Coast because of these events. And in addition, he and Twain have a falling out. They go into a venture on a project that goes awry, and Twain just gets disgusted with him. They did have a falling out in the past that was smaller, but Twain says about him at this time that he was absolutely devoid of conscience. In the early days, I liked Bret Harte, but by and by, I got over it. He was bad. He had no feeling. He had no conscience. An incorrigible borrower of money. He borrowed from all his friends. If he ever repaid a loan, the incident failed to pass into history. So, sadly, this relationship deteriorated. And of course, it's not a slight on Bret Harte as a person. He was a wonderful father, a wonderful husband, a wonderful writer. He helped Twain and many others through their lifetimes and their careers, and contributed greatly to the literary journals of the time. However, he did decide to move away from the East Coast because of these troubles, and he got a job as a U.S. commercial agent for Prussia, and he moved to Europe. So London welcomed him. He wrote, he lectured, he traveled, and he had a good life there. He was held in high regard, and he actually made more money in London than he did writing in the States. He didn't bring his wife with him, and as far as we know, they never met again. He did send money to support her when he was in London, but they parted ways when he left the United States. However, Bret Harte's heart remained in his homeland. He really loved the area, and it stayed with him. So one thing he said when he lived in London is that he wouldn't give a mile of the dear old Sierras for 100,000 kilometers of the picturesque Bod. So Tuolumne County, California, all of the people he met here really impacted him. They impacted his writings and stayed with him forever. So the Sierras really had an impact on him, just as he had an impact on the people who have read him. And it was here that he gathered experiences for his stories. He started his writing career, and it was his aim to accurately depict the California pioneers, and in doing so he made his mark as one of the defining voices of American literature. He did this partially through stories based on Calaveras and Tuolumne counties, and so we're privileged to be able to trace the impressions and insights he had of our communities and our landscapes through the stories he left behind. So really a memorable character, Francis Bret Harte, and great to remember what he contributed to literature.